Please, Aunt Marissa. Stop. I don't want this. My 12-year-old daughter's voice came from somewhere behind the closed door at the end of the hallway. The music was loud. Children were laughing in the garden. Adults were talking over one another beneath strings of gold balloons. For several seconds, I convinced myself I had misheard her. Then came the scream. I dropped the tray of lemonade glasses I was carrying and ran. When I reached the guest bedroom, the door opened before I touched it. My daughter, Ellie, stumbled into the hallway with both hands pressed against her head. That morning, her dark hair had reached almost to her waist. Her father had loved that hair. Before he died, he had taught himself how to weave it into a crown braid for her school concerts. Now one side had been cut above her ear, the other hung unevenly near her chin. Several long sections lay across the bedroom floor, beside a curling iron, a silver cape, and an open camera tripod. Behind Ellie stood my younger sister, Marissa, holding her phone. A hairstylist I had never met was frozen beside the chair, scissors still in her hand. Marissa rolled her eyes. "She moved," she said. "We were trying to give her a makeover." Ellie ran past me and through the house. By the time I caught up, she was standing in the middle of the garden while 30 birthday guests stared at her. My mother, Diane, stepped onto the patio. She looked at Ellie's ruined hair and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "At least now she won't outshine Savannah in the family photographs. Honestly, that child always has to be the center of attention." Several people looked down. One woman covered her mouth. Nobody challenged my mother. I walked across the lawn, wrapped my coat around Ellie, lifted her into my arms, and carried her to my car. Marissa followed me to the driveway. "For goodness' sake, Claire," she called. "It's hair. It grows back." I placed Ellie in the passenger seat and closed the door. Then I turned to my sister. "You had better hope that is the worst thing you did today." I drove away before she could answer. At that moment, Marissa believed she had destroyed nothing more serious than a child's hairstyle. She did not know that the cameras she had set up inside that bedroom had recorded her own plan. She did not know that the stylist was already preparing to confess. And she certainly did not know that, by the following morning, the photograph she had created to save her daughter's modeling career would instead destroy the business she had spent 3 years building. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 38 years old, and until that Sunday afternoon in September, I had spent most of my life believing that keeping the peace was the same thing as protecting my child. It was not. To understand why my sister wanted Ellie's haircut, you need to understand the kind of family in which Marissa and I were raised. My mother never said she had a favorite daughter. She did not need to. Marissa was the daughter whose school photographs were framed in the hallway. Mine were kept in envelopes. Marissa received dance classes, private tutoring, and a new car when she graduated. I worked weekends at a grocery store to buy my first laptop. Whenever I objected, my mother accused me of jealousy. "You're the capable one," she would say. "Marissa needs more support." By the time we became adults, Marissa had learned that needing something was enough to make it hers. I moved to Wellington, New Zealand when I was 26. I married Daniel Bennett 2 years later. Daniel was a landscape architect who could identify nearly every native tree in the country. He laughed loudly, cooked terrible pasta, and never entered a room without noticing who had been excluded from the conversation. He noticed my family immediately. After our first Christmas dinner with them, he waited until we were in the car before speaking. "Your mother treats Marissa like a responsibility, and you like a resource," he said. I stared through the windscreen. "That's dramatic." "No," he replied. "It's accurate." Daniel died 8 years later after a construction vehicle struck his car during a storm. Ellie was 7. For months after the funeral, I moved through life as though I were walking underwater. My mother visited twice. Marissa came once, took photographs of the flowers people had sent, and posted them online with a caption about holding family close. She left before Ellie woke from her nap. Daniel and I had owned a small art framing studio near Cuba Street. After his death, I considered selling it. Instead, I renamed it Bennett and Bloom and turned the unused back room into a workshop where local children could learn drawing, printmaking, and book illustration. Ellie grew up there. She spent afternoons sketching customers while they chose frames. She designed cards, bookmarks, and small watercolor prints that we sold near the register. She kept her earnings in a green ceramic jar painted with tiny white stars. By September, she had saved just over $700. She said it was for something important, but refused to tell me what. My mother called the studio Claire's Craft Shop. In 7 years, she never visited. Marissa, meanwhile, had reinvented herself. She had once worked in event administration, but after her daughter Savannah was born, she left her job and began building an online brand called Life with Savi. Savannah was 9, gentle, quiet, and far more interested in insects than dresses. Marissa dressed her in pastel clothing, arranged professional photo shoots, and entered her in advertisements and child modeling competitions. At first, the account was harmless. Then it grew. By the beginning of that year, Life with Savi had more than 60,000 followers. Marissa posted morning routines, lunchbox videos, sponsored clothing, and carefully edited photographs of Savannah, smiling in places she had begged not to visit. Her husband, Peter, believed the account earned enough to cover its expenses. It did not. Marissa was spending thousands on photographers, dresses, promotional agencies, and contest fees. She used credit cards Peter did not know existed. She borrowed money from my mother. She once asked me for $12,000 to finance what she called a major international opportunity. I refused. She did not speak to me for 4 months. The problem that led to Ellie's haircut began with a children's lifestyle campaign run by a company called Southern Star Creative. The campaign was called Natural New Zealand. It offered a 1-year advertising contract, a $10,000 education fund, and a place in a national tourism commercial. The company wanted children who appeared authentic and comfortable outdoors. Parents had to submit 1 professional photograph and 1 recent, unedited family photograph. Marissa submitted Savannah's professional portrait immediately. For the family photograph, she uploaded a picture taken at my father's 70th birthday. Ellie was in it. The photograph showed Savannah and Ellie standing beneath a pohutukawa tree. Savannah wore a cream dress. Ellie wore jeans and held a sketchbook against her chest. Her long black hair had been lifted slightly by the wind. According to someone who later worked with the campaign, the selection panel barely discussed Savannah. They wanted to know about Ellie. Marissa received an email asking whether the older, dark-haired girl was also available for the campaign. She replied that Ellie was shy, emotionally unstable after losing her father, and unable to work with strangers. Then she cropped Ellie out and sent a different version. The company asked for the original file. Marissa panicked. Instead of admitting that the child they liked was not hers, she invented a transformation concept. She proposed a video in which Savannah would help her grieving cousin find confidence through a surprise makeover. Marissa claimed Ellie had hidden behind her hair since her father's death and desperately wanted a new appearance but lacked the courage to ask. The idea was manipulative, cruel, and exactly the kind of emotional content brands often rejected, but Marissa did not send the complete details to Southern Star Creative. She told them she was preparing a family-centered confidence video and would provide updated photographs after Savannah's birthday. Then she hired a stylist. Savannah's birthday party was scheduled for Sunday, the 21st September, at Marissa and Peter's home in Lower Hutt. A week before the party, Marissa texted me, "Bring Ellie early." Savannah wants her in a special birthday portrait. I should have been suspicious. Marissa rarely included Ellie in photographs. When she did, she positioned her near the edge or asked her to hold something so her face would be partly hidden. But Ellie saw the message. "Aunt Marissa wants me in Savannah's picture?" "It looks like it." Maybe Savannah asked her. That was possible. Savannah adored Ellie. The 2 girls were cousins, but they behaved more like sisters whenever adults allowed them to be alone. Ellie taught Savannah to draw birds. Savannah collected feathers and pressed leaves for Ellie's art projects. Ellie wanted to believe the invitation meant something had changed. I wanted to believe it too. That was my mistake. On the morning of the party, Ellie asked me to braid her hair the way Daniel had. I had watched him do it hundreds of times, but my fingers never copied the pattern properly. After 4 attempts, I managed a loose crown with several strands falling around her face. She studied herself in the mirror. Dads were neater. Your dad was annoyingly talented. She smiled. Before we left, she opened her green jar and removed a folded envelope. "What's that?" "Savannah's present." She would not show me. We arrived shortly after noon. The house had been transformed into a golden-white garden party. A balloon arch surrounded the front entrance. A photographer arranged lighting equipment near the hedge. A sign beside the gate read "Savannah Golden Nint." My mother met us at the door. She kissed Ellie's cheek and immediately touched her braid. "That hair is getting rather excessive, isn't it?" Ellie stepped back. "I like it." My mother gave me a meaningful look, as though my daughter had said something rude. Marissa appeared from the kitchen wearing a pale gold dress. "There she is," she cried, wrapping an arm around Ellie, "our second little star." The phrase made me uncomfortable. What kind of portrait are you taking? I asked. A cousin reveal. Nothing serious. A reveal of what? Marissa laughed. You worry too much. She led Ellie toward the back bedroom. Savannah was waiting in the hallway, still wearing ordinary clothes and looking confused. Aren't we opening presents? Savannah asked. Later, Marissa said. Go outside and wait for the photographer. Savannah looked at Ellie. Ellie smiled reassuringly. Then the bedroom door closed. I took one step after them, but my mother blocked the hallway with a box of decorations. Help me with the table settings, Claire. I want to see what they're doing. It's a surprise. I don't like surprises involving my child. My mother sighed. This is exactly why Marissa finds you difficult. She tries to include Ellie, and you immediately create tension. That sentence worked on me because it had worked for 30 years. I followed her into the kitchen. For the next 15 minutes, she kept me occupied with glasses, napkins, candles, and a long complaint about how distant I had become since Daniel's death. The music outside grew louder. Then I heard Ellie say, "No." I stopped arranging glasses. My mother continued talking. I heard the word again. "No, please." I moved toward the hallway. My mother caught my wrist. Let them finish. Finish what? It's only a haircut. The room seemed to tilt. I pulled my arm free and ran. Inside the guest bedroom, Ellie was strapped beneath a silver styling cape. Marissa stood behind the camera tripod, giving instructions. The stylist had already removed most of the braid. Long sections of hair covered the floor. Ellie was crying. She said, "Stop!" I shouted. The stylist lowered the scissors. Marissa rushed toward me. "Don't interrupt the reveal." I stared at her. "The reveal?" She agreed to a makeover. "No, I didn't," Ellie cried. Marissa turned toward her. "You said you wanted to look grown up." I said Savannah looked grown up in her picture. The stylist's face changed. She looked at Marissa, then at me. "You told me her mother signed the consent form." "I did," Marissa said quickly. "No," I said. "I signed nothing." The stylist placed the scissors on the table. Marissa reached for Ellie's shoulder. Ellie screamed, shoved the cape away, and ran. That was when the garden fell silent. That was when my mother announced that Ellie would no longer outshine Savannah. And that was when I finally understood that my family had not made a mistake. They had made a decision. The drive home took 27 minutes. Ellie sat curled against the passenger door with her hands in her lap. She held the severed crown braid, still tied at one end with the blue thread I had woven into it that morning. Halfway home, she pulled down the sun visor and saw herself in the mirror. "Do I look stupid?" I pulled over beside the harbor. No. They were all staring. They were staring because the adults failed you. She touched the uneven hair above her ear. "Dad wouldn't recognize me." I unfastened my seatbelt and held her face gently between my hands. "Your father would recognize you in a crowded stadium, in the dark, from the other side of the world." Her mouth trembled. "He liked my hair. He loved you. Your hair was just something he enjoyed caring for." She began to cry again. I climbed into the passenger seat and held her until her breathing slowed. At home, I washed the hairspray and makeup from her face. I trimmed the worst sections, though I barely knew what I was doing. In the end, her hair formed an uneven bob that curved around her jaw. She looked older, not in the way Marissa had intended. She looked like a child who had discovered that adults could not always be trusted. At 8 that evening, Ellie fell asleep beside me on the sofa. My phone had been vibrating for hours. Marissa had sent 17 messages. "You embarrassed Savannah." The stylist misunderstood. Mum was only trying to calm everyone down. "You cannot punish the whole family over hair. The campaign deadline is tomorrow." That final message revealed more than she intended. At 8:43, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman introduced herself as Helena Ward, the stylist from the party. Her voice shook. "I need to apologize." I stepped into the kitchen. Helena explained that Marissa had contacted her 11 days earlier. She had shown her a digital consent form, supposedly signed by me. She had also sent several messages from an email address containing my full name. Helena believed I had approved the haircut. When Ellie started crying, Marissa said she was frightened of change and you had warned her not to listen if Ellie protested. My hand tightened around the phone. "Did you record anything?" There were 2 cameras in the room. Marissa said they were for the campaign. One was hers, the other was mine. Helena had brought a small camera to film styling footage for her portfolio. When she reviewed the recording after the party, she heard Marissa speaking before Ellie entered the room. Marissa had said, "Once the hair is gone, Claire can't undo it. Make sure you take enough off that Ellie cannot wear it in the campaign photograph." Helena sent me the file. She also sent the false consent form, payment receipt, emails, and a screenshot in which Marissa wrote, "The brand preferred Ellie. We only need to make Savannah look like the stronger transformation." I sat at the kitchen table and watched the recording twice. At 9:20, I called Southern Star Creative. The company's campaign director, Arun Patel, had purchased framed artwork from my studio several times. I did not know he worked for the agency until his name appeared at the bottom of one of Marissa's forwarded emails. He answered from home. I told him what had happened. He asked me to send everything immediately. 15 minutes later, he called back. "Claire, I need to be clear. We never approved a makeover involving Ellie. We asked Marissa whether Ellie had representation because our team was interested in her illustrations and appearance. Marissa told us Ellie was unavailable for medical reasons. She lied." "Yes." He paused. "There's something else. Marissa submitted a release form using your name." My stomach turned. "What release?" "A Guardian release authorizing us to use Ellie's image." I had never seen it. The signature was forged while I was speaking with Arun. Another person was uncovering a different part of Marissa's life. Petter had returned from work shortly before 10. He found Savannah crying in her bedroom. She told him what had happened. She also told him that Marissa had ordered her not to speak during the haircut because Mummy's business depended on it. Peter confronted his wife. Marissa said Claire was overreacting, Ellie had needed a haircut, and the campaign would bring money into the family. Peter asked how much she had spent. Marissa refused to answer. He searched the office. By midnight, he had found 4 credit cards, 2 unpaid personal loans, and invoices totaling more than $53,000. He also found a bank transfer from my mother, $21,000. The description read, "Savannah education expenses." The money had not been used for school. It had funded photo shoots, agency fees, travel deposits, and the birthday campaign. At 6 the next morning, my father called me. His name was Michael, though almost everyone called him Mick. My father had spent decades avoiding conflict. When my mother insulted me, he changed the subject. When Marissa took something that belonged to me, he promised to speak to her later. Later never came. That morning, his voice sounded different. "Can I come over?" "Yes." He arrived 40 minutes later carrying a canvas bag and a small wooden box. Ellie was still asleep. My father sat at the kitchen table and placed the wooden box between us. Inside were copies of bank statements, property documents, and a handwritten letter. He told me my mother had withdrawn $21,000 from an account they had created to fund his heart surgery. He had been diagnosed with a serious valve condition 3 months earlier. My mother had told him the surgery could wait. She had not told me about the diagnosis. "She said you had enough grief," he explained. "She said Marissa needed the money immediately and we could replace it before my operation." I looked at him. "Can it wait?" His silence answered me. "How soon is the surgery?" 6 weeks. I stood so quickly that the chair scraped across the floor. "We'll find the money." He opened the wooden box fully. Beneath the statements was a document naming me as the sole attorney for his medical and financial affairs. "I should have protected you years ago," he said. I kept telling myself silence made the house peaceful. It only made it safe for the person doing the harm. A small voice came from the doorway. "Grandad?" Ellie stood there in her pajamas. My father looked at her hair, and his face collapsed. He did not ask what happened. He already knew. Ellie crossed the room, opened the cupboard, and returned with her green ceramic jar. She placed it in front of him. "This is for your operation." He looked at the coins and notes inside. "No, sweetheart, I was saving it for Mum." I turned toward her. "For me?" She nodded. "I wanted to buy a new sign for the studio. The old one still has the crack from the storm." My father covered his eyes. Ellie pushed the jar closer. "The sign can wait." Before any of us could speak again, someone hammered on the front door. My mother's voice followed. "Claire, open this door." Marissa was with her. Peter stood several steps behind them holding a folder. I opened the door, but did not invite anyone inside. My mother pushed past me anyway. "We need to discuss this before you make the situation worse." Marissa held out a document. "Southern Star suspended Savannah's application. They said they received allegations from you." "Allegations?" "You know what I mean." Peter entered slowly and closed the door behind him. He looked as though he had not slept. My mother noticed my father at the kitchen table. "Mick, you should be home." "I am where I should have been years ago." Marissa placed the document in front of me. It was a statement claiming the haircut had been approved by all guardians and that Ellie's distress resulted from an unexpected reaction to the final style. At the bottom was a space for my signature. You expect me to sign this? If you don't, Marissa said, Savannah loses everything. Peter spoke from behind her. Savannah has already lost enough. Marissa turned. Stay out of this. I found the cards. Her face went still. Peter opened the folder and spread the statements across the table. 53,000, Marissa, and 21,000 from your parents. My mother interrupted. That was a private family arrangement. My father removed 4 bank records from his wooden box. No, it was theft disguised as help. It was my account too, my mother snapped. It was my surgery fund. Marissa looked between them. You told me the money was available. My mother glared at her. Do not start blaming me. Peter laughed once without humor. You both knew. My mother straightened her shoulders. I was supporting my granddaughter's future. My father pointed toward Ellie. You have 2 granddaughters. Nobody answered. Ellie walked into the kitchen and stood beside him. My mother softened her voice. Ellie, darling, Grandma is sorry you became upset. My father shook his head. That is not an apology. My mother looked irritated. What would you like me to say? The truth, I answered. Say you helped Marissa trap my daughter in a room. Say you distracted me while Ellie asked for help. Say you were more concerned about Savannah's photograph than Ellie's fear. I did not hold the scissors. No, I said. You only guarded the hallway. Marissa's phone rang. She ignored it. Then Peter's phone rang. He answered. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. When he ended the call, he looked at Marissa. That was Southern Star's legal department. They have the video. Marissa stared at me. You sent them the bedroom recording? Yes. They've canceled the contract? There was no contract, Peter said. There was an application. Marissa's phone chimed repeatedly. She opened the email, her face drained of color as she read. Southern Star Creative had permanently disqualified her from the campaign. The company was also terminating all future dealings with Life, with Savi, because of forged documents, misrepresentation, and the exploitation of a minor. They had referred the forged Guardian release to their solicitor. The birthday photographer had also turned over his files. One photograph showed my mother holding the kitchen door while I tried to leave. Another showed Marissa filming Ellie as Helena cut her hair. The evidence did not depend on anyone's interpretation. Marissa lowered herself into a chair. You destroyed my business. No, I said. Your business required my daughter to be silent while you hurt her. It deserved to be destroyed. My mother reached for the false statement. Sign it, Claire. We can still keep this private. I picked up the pages and tore them once through the center. My mother flinched as though I had struck her. My father stood. You will repay the surgery money within 30 days. She stared at him. And if I don't, I file for separation and let the court examine every account. You wouldn't. I should have done it years ago. Peter removed his house keys and placed them beside Marissa's phone. Savannah is staying with my sister. You will not film her, post her, or enter her in anything until we have a legal parenting agreement. Marissa began to cry. Not quietly. She cried the way she had cried as a child when consequences finally reached her. My mother went to comfort her. Neither of them looked at Ellie. That confirmed everything. They left together. Peter remained for a moment. I am sorry, he said to Ellie. I should have known what was happening in my own house. Ellie studied him. Savannah didn't do it. No, he said. She didn't. Don't be angry at her. I'm not. 3 weeks later, my mother repaid most of the surgery fund by selling investments she had hidden from my father. He underwent surgery in November. During his recovery, he stayed in the small flat above Bennett and Bloom. Ellie visited him after school and read graphic novels beside his chair. One afternoon, he asked her whether she wanted to grow her hair long again. Maybe, she said, but not because they took it. She decided to keep it short for a while. Helena, the stylist, voluntarily reported the incident to her professional association. She accepted a suspension and began working with an organization that taught salon professionals how to recognize coercion involving children. Peter filed for separation. He removed Savannah from every modeling account and deleted hundreds of photographs Marissa had posted without her understanding. Savannah came to our studio one Saturday carrying the unopened birthday present Ellie had given her. Inside was a handmade book. Each page showed the 2 cousins exploring a different part of New Zealand, watching glowworms in Waitomo, walking beside Lake Tekapo, standing beneath giant kauri trees. On the final page, Ellie had written, "For Savannah, so one day we can have adventures, nobody has to photograph." Savannah read it twice. Then she hugged Ellie and apologized. "You didn't cut my hair," Ellie said. "I didn't stop them. You're 9. That was all. They spent the afternoon drawing at the back table. Southern Star Creative never used the birthday footage publicly. Arun said Ellie had already been exposed enough. Instead, the agency offered her a paid commission to illustrate 6 native birds for an educational campaign. She drew a tui, a cararoo, a fantail, a kiwi, a kia, and a yellow-eyed penguin. The final payment was more money than she had ever imagined earning. She used the first part of it to replace the cracked sign above our studio. The new sign read, Biminet Tea and Bloomart, framing and stories worth keeping underneath. In smaller letters, Ellie added, Illustrations by Eleanor Bennett. On the evening we installed it, my father stood on the pavement with one hand pressed over the healing scar on his chest. Savannah held the ladder. Peter adjusted the light. Ellie stepped back to look at her work. For years, I believed family peace depended on how much pain I was willing to absorb without complaint. I was wrong. Peace built on a child's silence is not peace. Forgiveness demanded before accountability is not forgiveness, and a boundary is not cruelty simply because the people outside it are angry. My mother still sends letters. I keep them in a drawer unopened. Marissa has asked to speak with Ellie several times. The answer remains no. Perhaps that will change one day. Perhaps it will not. The decision will belong to Ellie, not to the adults who once believed they could make choices about her body and call it love. Her hair has grown past her shoulders now. Sometimes she wears it loose. Sometimes she ties it back. On special occasions, my father still tries to braid it. His braids are crooked. Ellie wears them proudly. And every morning when I unlock the studio, I look up at the new sign she bought for me with the money she had first intended to spend before all of this happened. It reminds me of the lesson I should have learned years earlier. You cannot always prevent people from showing you who they are. But once they do, you are allowed to believe them. You are allowed to take your child's hand. You are allowed to walk out. And you are allowed to lock the door behind you.